Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the go-to platform where faith-driven entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and experts share their stories, wisdom, and expertise to inspire and impact others. This isn't just another interview series. This is a strategic platform designed to amplify the voices of high-level entrepreneurs, which especially includes kingdom entrepreneurs who are making a real difference in their industries. My goal is simple: to serve you, the expert, by giving you a stage to share your message, expand your reach, and create lasting value for others. Through authentic, in-depth conversations, we uncover the real journeys, challenges, and victories behind today's leading experts. Each interview isn't just content. It's a powerful asset that helps you to establish authority, increase visibility, and connect with the right people. So with that, let's dive into today's episode. Once again, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another expert interview with Ken. And today I have special guest Susan Snow, and she's a trauma resilience coach, speaker, and author whose life was forever changed when her father, LAPD Detective Thomas C. Williams, was slain in the line of duty in 1985. Just 17 at the time, Susan and her family were thrust into a spotlight no one asked for, facing deep trauma and years of struggle. Through her journey of anguish, resilience, and healing, she now helps others overcome trauma. Her book, The Other Side of the Gun, fosters empathy, compassion, and hope. Welcome, Susan. I am so excited to have you on today's show. And so here's how I want to start. I just want to start with you sharing your story and unpacking all the things that is about you, how all this came about, how that blossomed into you becoming a coach, speaker, and author, and all the things. So I'm handing the microphone over to you, my friend. So take it away.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for a great introduction.
You're welcome.
I will just start off by kind of setting the stage. Being 17, I was a typical teenage girl in 1985. I had a new boyfriend, and it was Halloween 1985. My dad was actually testifying in a case that he was the lead detective in, and he was testifying that day. And so we were having a conversation. I asked him to go to a party that night. And being the strict father he said no. It was a school night and I wasn't gonna go. And we made a plan that he would leave the court, go pick up my 6-year-old brother from school from after school care and come home. And at that point, I would ask him again to see if I could go to this party. Unfortunately, I did not get that chance. I was getting ready. My mom is home, and she was taking her costume off from the day at work for her work party. And the phone rang, and I ran to go get it, thinking it was for me, and it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school, and all she said was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved. At that point, I saw my mom come around the corner. I handed her the phone and I tried to listen in to hear anything. And I couldn't hear anything, but I could watch her body language, and it told me the story, and it wasn't good. She got off the phone, looked at me, and said, "We're going to the school." So we jumped in the car. It was about a 7-minute ride, and got to the church school where my brother went. And at that point, parked the car. The way the school is, that there's a parking lot in the middle, and the kids got out on the back side of the school. It's now after 5. It's dark outside, and we started heading towards the back of the school, it looked like daylight. It looked like it was daytime still because there were so many police car lights lighting up the sky along with the ambulance. And as we continued to walk, both of us glanced over and saw my dad's truck. So we started to run towards the truck. And the closer we got to the truck, we saw glass on the ground. And as we rounded the corner, there he was, partially covered up. I watched my mom drop to her knees and scream, and I stood frozen in the street. I was not able to comprehend what I was looking at.
Mm.
So, what I ended up doing is hyper focusing on the ambulance. And my mind kept asking, like, where is everyone? Why isn't someone helping him? Because I wasn't putting two and two together. I didn't understand. There were two officers that pretty quickly grabbed our arms and escorted us back into the school, into an office. And my mom got pulled aside by some detectives. At this point, I had no idea where my brother was. I didn't know if he was hurt. I had no information whatsoever. And it was very chaotic. Um, so as I sat there trying to process everything that was going on around me, I heard two ladies in the office speaking to each other. And the one lady said that my dad was deceased. And that's when my world cracked. I wanted to jump out of that chair and run as far as I could. But my entire body felt like it was made of cement. I couldn't move. A little bit later, as I was sitting there, my mom came up to me and she said, I'm sending you with a neighbor. And I know that there was a part of me that wanted to jump out of the chair and run away from this situation, but the kid part of me, the one that was really struggling to process this, needed to be with my family unit. I wanted to be with my mom and my brother, and I didn't get that chance. I got sent with the neighbor, and this neighbor had known us for years. I was friends with her daughter when we were little, when we were young. So when she picked me up, she too was trying to process everything because our entire neighborhood was really quiet prior to this. And as we arrived at the house, the entire block was filled with law enforcement. There were helicopters overhead. This was a big story for the media, so they ascended. And I was completely inconsolable. All I wanted in that moment was my boyfriend that I had only been dating 3 months. And I begged her to call him at work, and she did. She called him, but she unfortunately didn't give him a lot of information. So when he arrived at the door, he told me to get my purse and my jacket. What hospital is he at? Where is he? Where's your mom? Where's your brother? All the questions that anyone would ask. And I just couldn't spit out the words. I just I couldn't. It would be real if I did. And the more persistent he got, the more I was like, okay, all right. I gotta say, I blurted it out. He's gone. And he said, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, he's gone. He's not at a hospital. And at that point, I watched my 19-year-old crumble, my 19-year-old boyfriend crumble in front of me. And we both started to sob, not knowing what our next steps were. Um, we just sat there. And, this was the 80s, this was mid 80s. There was no talk of mental health back then.
Mm.
There was no resources for kids. Even within LAPD, they had systems in place for the widows and the widowers. but they didn't have anything in place at the time for the kids. And so I really was struggling with everything that I was dealing with all at once. The shock, the trauma, the initial trauma of it, the shock, and all of these police officers everywhere I looked. And I finally did go home. My living room was filled with like 40 people. I had no idea who they were. I could hear my mom in the background, but she never, when I walked through the door, she never came to me or knew I even had arrived. Um, so I took it as this was my chance to go hide. So that's what I did. My boyfriend and I ran to my room and we shut the door and we shut the world out and sat in my room trying to process everything for as much as we could. And even when he left, like I didn't leave that room and I didn't want to answer any questions. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was really, really struggling because now, my dad was he was a very present father. He always made you feel like you were the most important person in that room. He was my security. I knew I was secure. I was safe because he was my dad. Um, and I didn't have a very healthy relationship with my mother prior to this. And he was always the voice of reason and the calm and the go between. And now I've lost that too.
Mm.
So trying to process all of this was really difficult for me. I didn't sleep that night. I just looked outside and it was daylight, so I popped out of my room and there was still law enforcement everywhere. I looked out the window and I saw law enforcement everywhere. There were still strangers in my living room. And I finally got to see my brother. I had heard him crying overnight. So I knew that he was physically okay and he was at the house. But when I heard him cry, I couldn't do anything about it because I had nothing left myself. So when I did finally get to see him, I was able to hug him and tell him I loved him and that we were going to get through this. And after that, it was just, I really struggled because I started having all the things that PTSD give you when you're dealing with trauma. Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea. All I knew is that I felt completely out of control. I I had panic attacks. I had deep depression. I wanted to be with my dad so badly, so I had suicidal ideation. All the things that were swirling around in my head daily. And I was terrified to tell anyone because I thought they would throw me in a loony bin and call it a day.
Mm.
I didn't know how to advocate for myself or ask for help um, because of that fear. So I just kind of existed. I lived in a fog and I really needed to have an adult around me, someone, anyone who would make me see that that I would feel better one day, that I wasn't going to be like this forever. And I didn't have that. Most of the adults would tiptoe around me and, they wouldn't want to talk about it or they wouldn't want to say anything or they didn't want to. And my friends, I mean, this isn't something that happens daily. It never had happened. This was a planned out assassination of my dad in retaliation for his testimony. Unbeknownst to me, which didn't come out until the trial, we too were targets. So that's why we had police presence. They didn't find the guys for 6 days.
Mm.
And during
But they
that
did find
time,
him.
eventually, yeah, six
Okay.
days later, there was a lot of them, unfortunately. And so I had bodyguards that followed me around. So I went from this normal teenage life and this normal family world to this and not knowing how to cope with that, not knowing how to navigate that, not, you know, my mom was doing her own thing. And obviously, my brother was 6, so I was 17. So, how I was processing was way different from what he was processing. And he actually saw it happen. My dad saved his life because my dad knew what was happening. Um, so it was, at the time, it was living in a fog. Wherever you pushed me is where I went. And my mom, about a month after the funeral and everything died down, people left and um, things were getting back to the new normal. My mom came to me and she said that LAPD wanted to pay for therapy for all three of us. And at the time, my teenage brain thought if you go to therapy, you're nuts.
Mm.
So I was it, but at the same time, I was also in that mindset that if you moved me in a certain direction, that's the direction I would go. So my mom voluntold me that I was going to therapy, and I didn't fight her on it. I went to my first session hoping that this was the adult that was going to finally help me feel better. Unfortunately, this gentleman was not what I call trauma competent, nor was he trauma informed. And because of that, he didn't want to dip his toes in the mud with me. Um, Never asked me anything about what that night did or how I felt. None of those particular questions that would allow me to open up, be vulnerable. He kept our sessions very um, common, conversational things like what my relationship with my mother was like, and my brother, and my boyfriend in school since
Very
I was a senior.
protocol, very just
Very
stale, yuck. Yeah.
stale. Yeah. And every week I saw him, I thought, today's the day. He's going to say something, he's going to do something to make me feel better. And every week I walked out of there disappointed, still feeling all of these things, the anxiety, the depression, the suicidal ideation, everything. And I saw him for a year. And at the end of the year, he looked at me and said, Susan, you're a well-rounded young lady. You're going to be fine for the rest of your life, and I don't need to see you anymore. I walked out of that office thinking, okay, I've snapped. I'm crazy. I'm going to have to figure this out on my own, even though I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to have to figure this out. Even a professional can't help me. I was hopeless. I just, at that very moment, I just thought, I'm just going to have to survive this. I'm just going to have to figure it out. And so what I ended up doing is I created an emotional mask. And that mask was built of what people said I was. So if someone
Mm.
said, Susan, you're so strong. Susan, you're so brave. That's what I hid behind. I'm brave. But inside, I was a mess. But on the exterior, that's what people saw. They saw strong, brave Susan. And unfortunately, by doing that, I was not capable of recognizing unhealthy friendships and um, situations where it was not healthy for me. Um, I molded myself to be the person those people needed me to be, which was taking away my authenticity.
Mm.
Like, I just molded myself into friendships to make them work. I was a huge people pleaser. And anytime anyone did show up to try to support me, I would push them away because in my mind, I would say, this is my burden, this is not yours. So I have to figure this out. I have to handle this myself. And that's exhausting because what you're doing is you're living in fight, flight, or freeze a lot, 24/7, 365. And it's exhausting. I was literally, it felt like I had two different personas for all that time. I was a strong, brave Susan, and then I was the hot mess express, like on the inside, and nobody saw it. And I did what people expected me to do.
Mhm.
I lived my life in expectation. Um, I married the boyfriend. We're still together.
Woohoo, at least
Um,
that.
we've been through hell and back in 40 years.
Mhm.
Um, but when we got married and then we had two kids, two beautiful kids, and I got to the point where I was like, I need to leave Southern California and go somewhere where nobody knows me, where I'm no longer looking behind my shoulder. Um, I'm not afraid of the night. I I wanted to leave that part of my life behind, which is kind of a joke because just because you leave geographically doesn't mean you're leaving your trauma behind.
Mhm.
It, but I told myself that. I literally told myself, if I leave that in California, it's going to stay in California. And we ended up coming here to Colorado, just outside of Denver. And at the time, I was working as a hairdresser. Um, I worked in a salon that was very close to Littleton, Colorado. And I was working on April 20th of 1999. I did a client's hair, took a break, went into the back room, turned on the little TV we had, and up popped the live coverage of the Columbine shootings. And I had a visceral reaction. I had flashbacks. As I
Mm.
was watching the TV, I had the flashbacks of that night and what I saw. And I turned white as a ghost. I started having a panic attack. I could feel it. And my colleagues didn't know my story. They had no idea what was going on with me. And remember, I was told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life.
Right.
So I had no idea what was happening to me. But I did what I normally do. I put that mask back on. I went out and I finished the day. Everybody around me was a mess, crying, mad. I mean, all of the emotions, but I stayed stoic. I kept telling myself, this doesn't have anything to do with me. I had no kids that went there. I don't live in that community. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. This will go away tomorrow. I won't feel like this tomorrow. And this was the story I gave myself, but the minute I walked through those doors and I went into my car, everything came flooding back. And this time it was even more intense.
Mm.
I found myself spiraling. I found myself back at suicidal ideation. There was a part of me that wanted to stop feeling this way and stop the hurting and stop the pain. But on the other side of it, I had two babies at home that needed their mom. And I didn't want to leave them. I was terrified. I stopped sleeping and I was really spiraling for a couple of days. And my husband recognized it, the smart man that he is. He met me at the door one day and he said, "You have two choices. You either go get help or I'm putting you in a hospital." And by that time, I was so terrified that I put that white flag up and I surrendered. I said, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll go get help today." And I made an appointment with a physician initially. I went, I saw the physician, and he put me in antidepressants because that's what they do. And then he handed me a business card of a trauma therapist. And he said, "I want you to make an appointment with this therapist." And I sat back and I literally started laughing in his face. And he kind of looked at me funny. And I said, "Look, I tried this 14 years ago and it didn't do anything. So what makes you think it's going to work this time?" And he said, "Honestly, you don't have a choice." And I said, "All right, I get it. I put up the white flag. I surrendered. I got to do whatever I need to do." So I made the appointment and I went and saw her. And in the first 3 minutes of sitting with that woman, I could tell that things were different. I felt like she was a safe space. I felt that way because she asked me the questions that I had longed to hear years ago. And she was finally asking me those questions, which made me feel safe and made me feel like I could be vulnerable with her. And I told her everything I went through at 17 and what I was currently dealing with. And she listened intently. And then she stopped and she said, "Susan, everything you've gone through since you were 17 is normal because you have PTSD." And I kind of looked at her funny because I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm not in the military. I didn't go to war. What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, what you need to know is that anyone who experiences or who goes through any type of trauma can experience PTSD. But what you need to know about that is that PTSD isn't something that just goes away. It's something you learn to manage." And that was the moment. That's when I had hope. That's when I was realizing that I could heal, that I wasn't crazy, broken, nuts, all the things that I thought that I was,
Mhm.
and that I could heal from this. And this was my person, finally. This was going to be the person that was going to help me and guide me in that way. And that I could heal from this. And I was so grateful in that moment. And it made me learn a big lesson. And that was um, that you have to find your person. You have to be able to, your therapist, one, should be trauma competent or trauma informed in your type of trauma. You can't get lumped into one trauma pool. Everybody's trauma is different, and there's different modalities for them. There's a different journey for them. And so I learned that because I found my person that would allow me to be vulnerable. And I felt a difference because if you're not vulnerable, the healing doesn't happen. You're holding yourself back. And I knew in that moment by taking that step forward and getting the help that I was needing, that I was taking my power back. And I was saying, I am no longer going to allow this horrific situation to have a hold over my life anymore. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to heal from this. I'm going to rise from this. And so those were lessons that I learned that were so important for my journey of healing. But I realized, this is something that other people as well can take this and learn from, especially if they're starting their journey of healing or have been thinking about it or scared or, because it is scary. Like, I'm not going to candy coat it. It's not easy. It was the hardest thing I ever did, the scariest thing I ever did, and the best thing I ever did. Because when you no longer have that pain held over you anymore, it allows you to have a life that you deserve to have.
Mm.
And so that is a lot of the message that I try to put out to people um, who feel like they're alone. Because I felt like I was alone for a very long, long time. Living in fight or flight and freeze for 14 years of your life is a long time. And in that, I felt like I was alone. I mean, my husband had a different experience than I did, so my brother had a different experience. My mother pushed me aside. Um, my mother chose to be in victimhood and still to this day lives in victimhood. I lived with a lot of guilt and shame in my healing because I felt like if I'm healing, it's my responsibility to help my mother heal and my brother heal. It took me a long time to realize that that's their journey. Now, my brother's doing fantastic. My mother's still in victimhood.
Mm.
So, that's another lesson that I learned is that the one person that you should be healing is yourself. Um, and it needs to be priority. You don't go and heal for someone else. You heal for yourself. And so that's kind of where the book came about. That's where the concept of the book came about because I got to the ripe old age of 50.
50 years young. That's the way I'll put it.
I don't understand. Like, I've talked to other people, and there's something about 50 that people are like, all right, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to change careers. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to whatever. Right. And I was like, I am mentally capable of writing a book and I have the tools that I'm going to need in this journey. Um, and it took me 4.5 years to write it.
Wow.
And the reason it did is because I had to relive and
Hmm.
sit with and feel all of the same emotions
I
that
was
I
going to ask you
felt,
about
all of it. Because when I sat down and I said, I want to write a book, there was not one part of me that was like, I am going to take this out or not disclose this or not. No, I was like, if I'm going to go and do this, I'm going to jump the cliff. I am going to be 100% vulnerable, 100% authentic because I, my readers deserve that. They deserve that. And so I was very animate about making sure that my vision was that I was taking the hand of my book reader and taking them on this journey and having them feel the emotions that I felt because it's important. It's important to see the hope. It's important to see the healing. And so, and there was fear. There was fear around this book as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
That.
Three different things that I was fearful for. One, my relationship with my mom was already hanging by a string. And I thought, okay, if I have to tell my story, I'm going to be telling hers as well. And this is either going to end what's left or it's going to open a conversation. And I had to be okay with either scenario. The other person that I was terrified was my husband because he and I have been through a lot in our relationship. And I thought this might bring up some wounds for him. And the third was my safety because there was still two men that are incarcerated that once you've been a target, there's always that thing in the back of your head that says, what if there's retaliation
Mm.
for you speaking out? And I had to sit back and really be clear about who I was writing the book for. And the first people that came to my mind was the law enforcement community because there was still so much pain and anger around my dad's death. And I thought if they saw my healing and they saw the resiliency side, that it would give them kind of permission to heal themselves.
Mhm.
Um, but as I thought about it, I thought, anyone who has gone through trauma needs to hear that they're not alone and that there is healing and that you can find resiliency. And so anytime those fears came up for me, I would picture those faceless people out there that needed to hear this message, that needed to see the hope and were needed to see that you can heal from whatever it is you've gone through. And it allowed me to bulldoze through the fear and just keep going, page after page after page. And so, that whole journey in itself was healing and cathartic for me. And I knew in some sort of way that people would be able to connect with something in the book. And that was that's the whole reason I did it. That's the whole reason I put it out there. One, people had always said, told my story in their heads based on their own perception of what they would have done in my position. And a lot of the times it was a wrong perception of who I was as a person. So, writing my book, I was like putting it all out there. This is me. And um, kind of quell some of the past perceptions of people thinking about who I was as a person or how I should be as a person.
So Yeah, I'm having like flashbacks of when we did our pre-interview together. Like, I'm just like, I don't even know. I'm back at that point. Like, I don't even know where to go from here. And here's the thing, every time I had a question lined up or I wrote something down, you like answered it. You are so very well put together with how you share your story. This
Thank you.
this has been an amazing interview. I kind of want where I want to go from here because you pretty much answered like questions that I would have asked you throughout that. Um, great job on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Coaching. You're also a coach. So not only are you an author, you're a speaker, you wrote this amazing book. So I want to talk a little bit about the coaching part of this. How
Mhm.
now you help people overcome trauma, any kind of trauma in their life. How do you do that? How do you help people overcome trauma?
Well, okay, so trauma resiliency coaching is a little bit different, and here's how that was born. When you have done the work with a professional therapist and you've gotten to a point in your healing, you're a different person. And sometimes you don't know what to do with this other person, this new person.
Mm,
And I was that person. And it wasn't until I was introduced to coaching and got a coach myself that I started to realize, oh my gosh, therapists deal with the trauma and the emotions around the trauma and all of that, right? But they really don't talk about things like patterning in your life. You see, because of the trauma I went through, there was a pattern that would pop up in my life, whether it was in my professional world or if it was in my personal world. And therapists don't normally deal with those. And so that's where coaching comes into play, is that I help people who have gone through therapy and still feel stuck. Like, what do I do with myself now? Um, Maybe it's a career that they've always wanted to do, but because their trauma and the things that they've gone through, it's kept them from doing it. It's kept them from moving forward. And so a lot of what I do is kind of going into figuring out patterns in your life
mhm.
and trying to kind of rewire your thought patterns around that. Um, really diving in. I tell some of my people like you're either going to hate me or you're going to love me.
That's a
um,
good coach.
because I'm gonna dive deep, and I we have to, right? But if you've done the therapy, diving deep shouldn't be too scary. You've already done the best work, right? The most work. The other situation that comes up a lot is not only patterning, but it's also how programming comes into play. And a lot of our programming comes from when we were children,
Mhm.
it, based on what your parents say, or your family members around you, or societal stuff, or whatever, right? And so there's some there's some thought process and some um, programming that can also hold you back from whatever it is that you've gone through. So that's kind of where I step in. I step in, we create goals around what is it you want to do? You know, is it a career? Is it a better marriage? Is it a better relationship with your children? What is it, right? Um, I do go into utilizing calming of nervous system techniques and things like that. So breath work and it- just different things like journaling. I teach people how to journal. Um, things that are just really things that therapists don't spend a lot of time on. And so I always tell them, like, when you get to a certain point in therapy, I'm like, the continuation of.
Right.
And so that way I can help them and guide them. Sometimes you don't even know what you want to do. So having some, I meet them where they are and I figure out where they want to go. And then we make a map, getting to that place, wherever, whatever that needs to happen. And each individual is individual. I am not one of those one size fits all
Yeah.
coaches either. Like everybody is very individual, and so I take that kind of approach.
I do the same type of coaching. Everybody's different. Everybody gets a custom, treatment from me. So, because it can't be one size fits all.
Mm-mm.
Now, the other thing that, so I am a little bit curious. What does this pattern look like? These patternings and everything else. Can you go a little bit deeper and
Oh,
explain
sure.
what that
I
looks
can give you,
like?
yeah, I can give you an example. So I told you back before I started to heal from things. Um, I had this pattern of, you don't have to help me. I'm going to figure it out on my own, right? That followed me my whole life. So that followed me as a hairdresser. It followed me into real estate, which I still do, some real estate now, but that whole, like, I'm just going to take on everything.
Oh,
I had a really hard time, um, you know, allowing other people to help me.
mhm.
Um, I would take on a project and I would just take on a project. So like I would run around doing everything. And so that was stemmed from me having to take care of myself my whole life. And it wasn't until my very first coaching, talk about hating your coach. My very first coaching, um, session, we were talking about this patterning. And she said, okay, I want you to pick 5 people, 3 personal people and 2 business people that you have done that to. So someone who has shown up in your life, yeah, shown up in your life to support you in some sort of way, and you pushed them away because in your mind you said what I used to say, it's my burden, it's not yours. I will handle it myself. I got this, right? And so I had to make a list of the people I did this to. And then she said, and now you need to call them. And when you call them, you're going to give them a scenario that that you did this to them. You're going to ask them to forgive you for doing that. And you're going to ask them to hold you accountable if they see you doing it again. I was like, what? What? But I
Talk
don't want
about
to do
diving off
that.
the high dive. Wow.
That woman did not play. Like she just did not. And I did. And they were the most eye-opening, beautiful conversations I have ever had in my entire
Of
life.
course they were, yes.
I no longer do that anymore. Um, but I had a conversation. The biggest person out of all those people was my husband. And I sat on the couch and I told him, some scenarios where he tried to show up for me and I pushed him away. And he sat there and he listened to me. And this was 5 years ago. And he said, 35 years later, I'm still learning about you as a person. And, and he thanked me. And it was crazy healing, crazy healing. And, he's been on this journey with me this whole time. And I've spent so many years like healing myself
Right.
and focusing on myself that until I wrote the book, I didn't realize, oh my God, he went through trauma too. He
Mhm.
may not have seen what I saw, but he was there that night and every day after that. And we had, he saw his own car in photographs at the trial where they were surveilling my house. So he too was a target.
Mm.
And that's terrifying.
Mhm.
Um, so, I think that that was a very important pattern for me to recognize. It was life-changing pattern to recognize and change. And all I had to do was have conversations, vulnerable conversations,
Right.
but conversations. And it made me learn something about myself. And it allowed me um, to change my thought patterns and no longer feel like I have to handle everything all the time. Now, I still slip up once in a while, especially
Of
being a
course.
mom. Being a mom, it's easy to do, right? But my kids are adults, grown adults now. And so I've had to have that same conversation with me where I was like, you know what? They're grown adults and they're going to have to figure things out. You can come alongside them, you can support them, but you can't fix it for them.
Right.
So, this is where coaching comes into play. This is why it's important. And this is why I want to help others. I really want to help them so they don't feel stuck with this new person they've become.
It's
They
amazing.
can take this and use it as a purpose to move forward with their goals and what they want to do.
That is amazing. You've got such a powerful story. And it's very obvious and apparent that you have done the work. And you know how I know that? Because I've kind of already shared this. You tell your story so well, I barely needed to ask any questions to draw out things. That's what tells me that you've done the inner work. You've had the conversations, you've talked to the people, you've done the healing, and now you've written this powerful book and you're coming on this interview. And seriously, like, I've barely asked you any questions. Normally I pull questions from like the background and I'm like, okay, let's go here, let's go there. I didn't even have to do that with you. Like, I don't think I have had an interview like this in a long, long, long time. So I've got to say, the evidence is how you tell your story and how detailed it is and how thorough you are about telling your story. That's the evidence on the power of you as a coach, the power of you as an author, and the message and the hope that you want to give people. That's the power. So, in wrapping up, because we are, getting close to the hour mark, and
Mhm.
can you believe it, right? The hour mark,
Crazy.
time goes by like that. Um, in wrapping up, I want to ask you this one last question.
Sure.
What are 3 to 5 things you would like to leave the listener with today?
Oh gosh, I get this question all the time, actually. There's so many. Um, well, like I said, I think the number one thing that your listeners need to know is that they're not alone.
Hmm.
The number two is that there is hope. And three, that you can heal from anything that you've gone through. And in doing that, you're taking your power back and you're not allowing that person or that thing to hurt you any longer because you're going to heal from it and rise from it. So, um, I think that's the other really, really, really important point I want to make is that your healing is your healing. It's not your therapist's healing. And because of that, you have every right to interview your therapist. Make sure that they understand the type of type of trauma that you've gone through and that they are trauma competent and trauma informed. Because if they aren't, they're not going to be the right people for you because you're not going to have that safe space like I talked about. You're not going to, it will hold you back from being 100% vulnerable. And understand when you're in a therapist patient relationship, that is the most intimate relationship you have besides a partner or a spouse. And so, that's important in your healing. It is key in your healing. So if you have to interview three or four therapists, then so be it, right? Because if you're going to do it, you got to get it right,
Yeah.
and you're going to know that once you've interviewed them or, you've interviewed them and you feel a little bit better and you go a couple of times and you still feel like, this isn't feeling like I'm connecting with this person. I don't, I'm not feeling that safe space. Move on. And generally, most therapists will say, I get it. Let me send you to such and such, right? So most therapists will, if they don't feel like they're the right one, they will help you find somebody. Um, but don't give up. I gave up. I thought, oh, this guy, basically the first one, therapy doesn't work. Just like I hear a lot. And it's just because I hadn't found my person yet. And when I did, it changed my life. So keep going.
There's so much power in that, you guys. So, to the listener, if you've come across this video and you are listening and you're like, yeah, I really need to, seek some help and guidance, that's actually the best advice. Interview your therapist.
Mhm.
I really, really, really believe that's so powerful, Susan. So, please, you guys, find the right therapist. Even if it takes just a little bit of time, it's going to be well worth it in the long run. So, Susan, I lied. I do have one more question. What about the person? And this question is just screaming in my mind because I've just got to think about that person. What about the person that's listening to this and is doubting they can ever heal, is doubting they can ever let it go? They're in the mud, they're in the murk, they're in that horrible mindset, and they're doubting. What would you say to that person who's listening right now?
I would ask them what it would look like. What does healing look like for you? What do you want your life to look like? And let's work on getting you there.
Mm. What?
Because I've met people in the past where they've like, and it broke my heart. And here's what she said. I would like to wake up one day and smile.
Ooh.
And, she was a woman that was uh, sexually assaulted as a kid from age 3 to 7. And she said, I don't ever wake up smiling every single day. The only time I smile is after I've drank. And she was on her way to rehab when I met her. Um, So, it could be the littlest, tiniest thing like that. Being able to wake up and smile, wake up and feel good, you know?
Mm.
Don't feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders anymore. And that's what therapy does for you. That's what healing from trauma does for you. And not having that pain held over your head every single day. So that's what I would ask them. What does that look like for you?
So powerful. So powerful. What if they're in the spot where they just can't envision any of that? How would you maybe prompt them to start envisioning that?
I would, I think a lot of times, we all have a happy place. We do. So a lot of times I'll ask people to envision their happy place.
Mm,
And
so
when they feel like they're overwhelmed, go to their happy place. I know it sounds so little, but if you're in the midst of it, I remember this, like you feel like you're drowning, and I get that. Um, Unbeknownst to me, those were the times where I would start thinking about fun times I had with my dad.
mm,
And it would change my sadness to love and just being grateful for being able to have that experience with him. And so sometimes it's really hard to even think about your happy place. Here's the thing, when you are in the midst of it, every day is going to be a little hard, right?
yeah.
So you got to learn to give yourself some grace, first and foremost. And, you know, take a bath, go for a walk, get some fresh air, do something for yourself, something that makes you feel better, healthy things that make you feel better. And you will see that once you continue to do those little things, it will make a difference.
That is amazing. Susan, such powerful stuff today. And so, how can people reach out to you? How can people get into your world, connect with you if they want to work with you, speak with you, or just even connect with you? How can people get
Sure.
into your world?
Absolutely. Well, I did want to tell your listeners that I do a 40-minute free discovery call. And whether you're starting out, don't know where to start, um, maybe you've gone through some healing with a professional and you're feeling stuck,
Mhm.
you can go on to my website, which is susansnowspeaks.com. It's my one-stop shop. It has information on my speaking, on my coaching, and also it has some information on my book as well.
Amazing. You guys, so below in the description of this video is going to be Susan's bio, and then there's going to be links on how you can connect with her, including that link to get on a discovery call with her, a strategy call, unpack that. You guys, that's free. You got nothing to lose there. So, all of those links will be below in the description below. And so, lastly, as we're wrapping up here, maybe this is your first time seeing something from me. You're like, well, this is great with Susan, wonderful. Well, who's this Ken guy? What's he about, and why is he doing these interviews and all that other stuff? Well, I've lost 62 and a half pounds and I've kept it off for 7+ years now, all without a diet and having that be sustainable. And right now, I'm literally giving away my 3 secrets to help you to lose weight, feel energized, and get healthy without starving or dieting. In just 3 powerful one-on-one sessions with me, I've got a mini educational boot camp that exposes the three biggest lies that are keeping people sick, stuck, and overweight because that's how that industry makes money. And I show them how they can fuel their body God's way and break free and finally keep the weight off for life, like I've been able to do easily and sustainably. So, to get into my world, below all Susan's stuff is going to be links to connect with me and get in my world, including the link to join my mini educational boot camp. It is extremely reasonably priced, and you've got nothing to lose but those extra pounds. And you've got everything to gain in the right way and in a freeing way. This is not a workout plan. This is not an eating plan. This is a foundation for you to move forward on. One that I can pretty much guarantee you will never be moved from again. So those are all the things, you guys. Connect with Susan, you guys. I cannot, with such a powerful, heartfelt story that she shared today and how she conquered through that and how she now helps people get into her world. If even if it's a small bit of trauma that's in your life that you have really struggled with, get into her world. At least get on a 45-minute call with her. You've got nothing to lose there either. All right, you guys. So with that, Susan, do you have any last minute thoughts before we pop off here?
Oh my gosh. Well, I hope everybody has a blessed day.
That's good enough. All right, you guys. Have a great rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time of day you are listening. And I will catch you on the next expert interview. Talk to you guys later.